Shabbat Shalom. When we're young, we do stupid things. I'm pretty sure that most people here can sympathize a little bit. I had a friend in college, still a friend, but we don't get to see each other in person all that much anymore. And we liked to go out and do various nature activities, hiking and all that sort of thing. We went up from my university in Northern California, and we did some camping up in the Shasta Forest, which, if you ever get out into California, absolutely gorgeous area. That's not the stupid part. Those were great memories and lots of fun. But then, when I was back in San Diego, I invited him to come visit. Still not a problem. But we said, let's go camping. But let's do camping a little differently. And he talked me in to going camping out in the desert of San Diego. Yeah, not a lot of fun. He grew up, as his father was Apache, he grew up back and forth between Seattle and New Mexico. And I was not prepared for just how miserable it is to go camping in a desert. It's a completely different experience. Now, we hauled in, a ton of water and our tent and our food and all of that. But you know what you end up doing a lot of in the desert? Sitting there wishing you weren't in the desert. Because honestly, what else are you going to do? Are you going to take a few little, trail hikes and enjoy the world? Well, it is beautiful, don't get me wrong. But the heat is oppressive. And I don't care what people say. It may be a dry heat. It is still miserable. Summer in Florida has nothing on summer in the San Diego desert. But we were lucky because we prepared and we had our stock and our supply, and as uncomfortable as the situation was, at least the camaraderie, the friendship, that was fine and survived the experience. But it means that now as we get into Bamdibar, our own journey through the wilderness, through the desert of the Sinai Peninsula, we have to take stock on where the Israelites are, and indeed on what is life like in the wilderness in the first place. So as I have been driving home many, many times, what is the defining feature of Midbar in biblical vocabulary? What do we mean when we say the wilderness of Sinai? Mm-hmm. The word davar, what does the word mean? Right? When we say midbar, what does it actually mean in having a wilderness? All right, well, the second half I'm going to have to come back to, but the first part, that you are alone by yourself. And then the idea that makes it easier to communicate with God, perhaps. But were we alone? We just read in the Torah portion 600,000 people just of the military group, not counting all of the people who were too young, too old, the Levites, as well as all of the females that were not in the fighting ranks. How alone is that? We're Midbar. We were alone altogether. Yes. We were as one, and thus as one we were alone. Because the defining feature of the Midbar is that nobody lives there. That it is ownerless. It is the untrammeled wilderness, the empty tracts of land that are empty for a reason. Because they are uninhabitable, or at least very, very difficult to inhabit with any sizable population. Which means if we're going to be traveling through this Midbar, through this uninhabitable space, what do we need? Everything, right? Because there's no 7-Eleven on the street corner. There are no farms for us to grow food in. There are no pastures to graze flocks. That means that everything has to be provided for us. And we get the manna, mentioned much earlier, and through numerous different places, we also understand that there also had to be a well. There had to be water for all of these thousands and thousands of people to be able to survive in the Midbar, to survive there in that wilderness. Water is the number one concern when you are traveling through this type of place. Because you can go for a week, 2 weeks maybe even without food. Without water in that type of environment, you are dropping very, very quickly. which means it's not surprising that our sages often discuss, and in some unfortunate detail, what happens if you find yourself in the Bamdibar and you're not sure if you have enough water. Case in point, you and your friend are traveling through the wilderness. You are going through the desert. And remember that there are places in Israel that are also Bamdibar, that is also a wilderness area. And as you're going through, you begin to realize that you have miscalculated your time, that there was some delay, perhaps you had to head back and then you didn't make proper preparations. And you realize you're not going to reach your destination with enough water for both of you. I mean, you've got your canteen, but his ran dry. What do you do? What do you do? Pray. Of course, absolutely. But in an immediate sense, the prayer is unlikely to produce rain immediately from the sky or spring, and it might. But unfortunately, we cannot depend upon that because, as our rabbis say, none of us should assume that we are so righteous that a miracle will be made for just us. We have to actually grapple with these things with our own hands. You know the answer. Good, because I know you've studied Talmud. All right, so the official answer in the name of Rabbi Akiva is if my canteen is still full and I have just enough water in my canteen to see me to our destination, and my companion, his canteen is empty, and without more water he will die before he reaches the destination, is I keep the canteen for myself. And you've been a good friend, like a brother to me. I'll bury you as I go, but this water's mine. And this water is needed to get me to my destination. Because, and again, the idea is that if you split the water, that neither of you are going to survive. There is only enough for one. Does that sound like an inspiring answer? Ethical and moral and uplifting? Or are you all a little bit more depressed than when you first came in? The thought of, oh dear, I have to make these hard choices. So first is survival. Now, I will point out before we go any further that there are three rules within Judaism that we don't break for our own survival. One of them is idolatry. The public request to renounce God and pray to statues. Better they should execute us than we engage in that. The other is sexual immorality. The Romans have you at spear point and say, I want you to commit adultery, I want you to sleep with your relative. Better they should go ahead and kill me than I do that. And the third is murder, that we are not allowed to murder an innocent person to save our own life, which, by the way, is why your friend, his solution is not kill you and take the water. For him to kill you and take the water to save his own life would also be a crime, whereas for you to hold on to your water and save your life is not considered criminal. Do we see a distinction there? Or is me holding on to what I have and him dying the exact same as him killing me to take what he needs to survive? Is there a difference or not? I see a hand. You know, it could work out. Maybe if I have my water, I can hurry on to the destination, refill the canteen, hurry back and help you. It might work out, so please don't kill me. It's a difficult situation. And that's the point of Jewish law, is that we study how to handle difficult situations while still hoping and praying that such situations never arise. But we need to understand that as much as the Torah extols us to help others in need, as much as it extols us to be supportive of all of those that are in dire straits, the Torah never says you have to sacrifice your life to achieve that. The Torah is very humanistic in the sense that it values your human life as much as it values the next person's human life. But of course, that also means that there's a corollary, that you are expected to value the other person's life. Yes, not at the expense of your own, not at the loss of your own, but everything short of that, absolutely. So let's rewind that scenario. And now there is probably enough water for the two of you, but that's going to mean that you'll be subjecting yourself to the hardship of helping your friend along. You've got a slightly larger canteen, you can share it, and you're pretty sure that'll be enough for him and enough for you, and then you'll get to your destination, but you're introducing maybe a little bit of risk. Certainly you might slow yourself down. Maybe your friend has a broken leg and you're having to help him along. Am I allowed to say, hey, you know, helping you would make things a little harder for me. So it's my water, tough. Madison, you're shaking your head. Beautifully put. And by the way, I should point out, I keep using the term friend only because of my story of camping with my friend, but it could be an absolute stranger and the rules are the same. It could be a family member, the rules are the same. It could be your hated enemy, not the person like you're actually fighting for your life with, but just that annoying guy who's always bugging you, and the rules would still be the same. And Madison is hitting it right on the head, which is, wait a minute, hold on. I understand why I get to keep all the water in my canteen if all the water in the canteen is all that's going to keep me alive. But once that's no longer the case, once it's no longer my life versus someone else's life, but it is now just my surplus versus someone else's life, my convenience versus someone else's life, my anxiety versus someone else's life, well, the formula has changed completely. It doesn't sound like much. Just doubling the water, why should the answer be so different? It's still my water, still my possession. What claim does he have on my canteen? And yet, Judaism says he has an infinite claim upon the extra that you have, that is the difference between life and death. Does that mean he's allowed to use force? Well, then we get into community issues of trying to actually extract what is needed from a surplus in order to provide for others, and there are many long conversations in the Talmud about how that works. We shortened the phrase of that whole conversation in the modern world to taxation. But Judaism recognizes that once you move from that life and death situation, where what you have is what you need to survive, that we share what is left in order that others too can survive. And this is played out throughout the legislation that we see in Bamdibar, throughout the discussion of our travels, throughout the discussion that comes in the book of Devarim, some of which we're going to read through Shavuot. We recognize that there is a switch that happens in our ethical rules. When we are in a state of life and death scarcity, there is one set of rules to play with. And when we switch from that state towards not necessarily overflowing abundance, but simply no longer life and death scarcity, then the rules change. We must recognize that Torah wants each of us to live. Torah values each of our lives, and the Torah never asks you to lay down your life to save someone else. If you choose to be a martyr, well, in many circumstances that is laudable, and others it's stupid. We can talk about those another time. But the Torah never demands that you give up your life to save someone else. Give him your canteen. Be the bigger person. Help them. The Torah doesn't ask you to do that. Because the Torah is written recognizing the value of each life, your life and the person next to you. regardless if they are famous or amazing or a huge contributor to society and you're just a nebuch. That doesn't matter. Your life is still worth what's in your canteen. You get to survive. But the Torah also tells us as soon as your canteen is doubly full, that you don't get to play, it's mine, as a trump card when the other person is dying. That now you are in a position to help. Now you are in a position to give them a shot. That balance in Judaism, the infinite worth of each of us and the infinite capacity of each of us to help another, is one of the most beautiful things that God wrote into this tapestry of halakha. To know that each of us is valued, cherished, and worthwhile, that none of us are ever going to be told, you have to give up all that you have to give up your life so that someone worthier than you will be able to survive, is an incredible statement about the intrinsic worth of a human life without labels and without some other societal valuation. You are you deserve to live. But to also recognize that once you have what you need to live, that the person next to you also deserves to live. And that you are then in a place to be able to help them a little. Maybe not completely. Maybe you only have a few extra, ounces of water that you can help them. That might make a difference. But you give that. Because that's what the Torah asks us to do. Never to give up our entire life, but to give up the spare that we have, the surplus that we have. And it is wisdom to recognize when we are in a state of scarcity and life and death choices, and when we are in a state of surplus. Too often we are anxious, feel that we need a little more before we can give. Most of the time we are wrong about that. Shabbat Shalom.